Disclaimer: the story is a work of fiction inspired by the title, a simple massage turned into something I never expected. Shocking confession. Any resemblance to real people, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. The narrative is intended for emotional and dramatic storytelling purposes only and may explore intense or sensitive themes. Reader discretion is advised. I never thought much about massages. For me, they were simply a way to unwind, a luxury I allowed myself once in a while after a long week of stress at work. That Friday afternoon, I booked an appointment at a small, newly opened spa tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop downtown. It looked warm and inviting from the outside, with soft golden lights spilling through lace curtains. The receptionist greeted me with a polite smile and offered me herbal tea. The air smelled faintly of lavender, and somewhere in the background, a slow, soothing melody played. It felt like the perfect place to leave my worries behind. My massage therapist introduced herself as Claire. She was in her late 20s, with calm eyes and a voice that carried a strange mix of warmth and gravity. Something about her felt familiar, though I couldn't quite place where I might have seen her before. "Please, make yourself comfortable," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "I'll give you a few moments before we begin." I lay face down on the massage table, the crisp white sheet cool against my skin. The first touch was exactly what I expected: gentle, rhythmic, and deliberate. Her hands moved in a practiced way, working through the knots in my shoulders with just the right amount of pressure. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth seep into my muscles. For the first 15 minutes, nothing was out of the ordinary. Just the quiet hum of the music, the occasional creak of the floorboards, and the scent of essential oils drifting through the air. My breathing slowed, and I felt myself sinking deeper into the table, almost forgetting where I was. But then, something changed. It wasn't drastic, not enough to jolt me upright, but subtle. Her touch lingered a second longer on my lower back, her fingertips tracing in a way that felt less clinical and more intentional. I told myself it was probably just part of her technique. After all, every therapist had their own style. Still, I couldn't shake the faint shiver that ran through me. Claire's hands moved to my arms, and when she leaned closer to adjust my position, I caught the faint scent of her perfume, floral, but with a darker undertone I couldn't identify. My mind flickered with curiosity. Why did her presence feel so oddly personal? Then she spoke. "You seem tense. But I think it's more than just your muscles." Her words hung in the air, unexpected and strangely intimate. Before I could respond, she began working on my shoulders again, as if nothing unusual had been said. I tried to brush it off, but something told me this wasn't going to be just another relaxing massage. Something about Claire and the way she looked at me when I first walked in felt like the beginning of a story I didn't know I was part of. The next few minutes felt like a strange blur. Claire's hands moved over my skin in steady motions, but the rhythm was different now. It wasn't the mechanical, predictable pattern you'd expect from a professional massage. There was something more deliberate in each movement, almost as if she was speaking through touch instead of words. Her fingertips lingered at the base of my neck, brushing my skin in slow, sweeping circles before pressing firmly into the muscles. The warmth from her palms spread deeper than I thought possible, sending small ripples of heat through me. My heartbeat felt a little too loud in the quiet room. I tried to focus on the music, the faint chime-like sounds, but my attention kept returning to her hands. They moved lower, pausing slightly at the curve of my spine before pressing into my lower back. She wasn't rushing. If anything, she was taking her time, as though she knew exactly where each knot and ache lived inside me. "You're holding a lot here," she murmured, her voice low and almost coaxing. I didn't respond right away. There was something in the way she said it, like she wasn't just talking about my muscles. I swallowed, unsure if I should speak, but before I could, she leaned closer, her breath just grazing my ear. "Sometimes," she continued softly, "the body hides things the mind can't admit." The words settled over me like a weight. I didn't know why, but they made my skin prickle. I wondered if she said that to all her clients, or if this was meant for me specifically. Her touch moved to my arms, tracing slow lines down to my wrists before curling her hands gently around them. She held them there for a second longer than necessary, and I felt an unspoken question in that hold, a hesitation, a testing of boundaries. Then she shifted her position, coming around to stand near my head. Her fingertips brushed my temples, and I opened my eyes for the first time since the massage began. She was looking directly at me. Not the polite, distant look of a service provider, but something deeper, searching. Her dark eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, the air between us felt heavier, charged. "Is this okay?" she asked softly. The question was simple, but the way she asked it wasn't. I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure what I was agreeing to. She smiled faintly, almost knowingly, before resuming the massage. But now, every movement felt like it carried double meaning, one for the body and another for something far more personal. I could feel it building, the shift from ordinary to something else entirely. And somewhere in the quiet of that dimly lit room, I realized I didn't want to stop it. The dim lighting in the room seemed to blur everything except her face. When Claire's hands paused and she leaned slightly forward, our eyes met again, longer this time. It wasn't an accidental glance, it was intentional, steady, as if she was reading something in me I hadn't said aloud. Her gaze held me there, and in that silence, I felt stripped of the polite barriers I usually kept between myself and strangers. It was strange. This wasn't the kind of look you exchange with someone you've only just met. It was heavy with unspoken meaning, layered with curiosity, empathy, and something else I couldn't quite name. She tilted her head slightly, studying me. "You look like someone who carries too many secrets," she said quietly, almost to herself. I blinked, unsure how to respond. The comment felt too personal for the setting, yet it didn't feel invasive, it felt seen. She smiled faintly, as though she knew she'd caught me off guard, and then her hands returned to my shoulders. But now, every press of her fingers felt amplified by the weight of that moment. I could sense her watching me even when my eyes were closed. The room was silent except for the faint chime-like melody playing in the background, but her presence was louder than any sound. I could feel her breath near me as she leaned over to reach my back. It wasn't that she was too close, it was that she was intentionally close. At one point, she gently guided me to turn over so I was facing upward. The ceiling above was softly lit, casting a golden glow that made the space feel more intimate than it already was. When I looked at her again, she was standing just at the edge of the table, her hands resting lightly on the blanket covering me. Her eyes didn't waver. It felt like we were having a conversation without words. Her gaze asked questions my lips were too hesitant to answer. My own eyes, I think, betrayed the fact that I didn't entirely want this to remain just a professional exchange. Finally, she spoke, barely above a whisper. "Sometimes, people come here for more than just relief from sore muscles. Sometimes, they come because they want to be understood." Something inside me shifted. I wasn't sure if it was her words, the way she said them, or the quiet certainty in her expression. It was like she had peeled back a layer I didn't know I'd been hiding under. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. But the silence between us became its own answer. Her fingers brushed my wrist again, light and lingering, before she resumed her work. But this time, the massage felt less like a service, and more like a conversation only the two of us could hear. And deep down I knew this was no longer about the massage at all. Claire's hands slowed, almost as if she was hesitating. Then, without warning, she broke the comfortable silence that had settled between us. "I don't usually talk much during sessions," she began softly, her voice carrying a note of vulnerability. "But there's something about you, something that makes me feel like I can." I opened my eyes, meeting hers again. Her expression was unreadable, half confident, half uncertain. She moved to my shoulders, her fingers pressing gently into the tense muscles there. "You remind me of someone I used to know," she continued, her tone careful, as though testing each word before releasing it. "Someone I cared about more than I should have." Her statement landed between us like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples through my mind. More than she should have? I wanted to ask questions, but my voice felt caught somewhere between curiosity and restraint. I stayed silent, sensing that she needed to lead this. She took a deep breath, her hands never stopping their slow, deliberate movements. When I was younger, I had a friend, someone I trusted completely. But one night, things changed between us. It wasn't planned. It wasn't supposed to happen. And afterward, I didn't know how to look at them the same way again. Her words were intimate, almost confessional, yet she didn't look away. Instead, she studied my face, searching for a reaction. I swallowed, my chest tightening. "And you lost them?" I asked quietly. She nodded. We drifted apart. Not because I wanted to, but because the truth can be too heavy for some people. For a moment, her hands paused, resting gently against my collarbone. "I don't know why I'm telling you this," she admitted, her voice lowering to almost a whisper. "Maybe because you feel like someone who wouldn't run." The words hit me unexpectedly, stirring something inside me. I wasn't sure if it was empathy, intrigue, or something far more dangerous. The room seemed warmer now, the air thicker. I could hear my own breathing, steady but heavy, mingling with the faint chimes of the background music. Her story lingered in my mind, painting a picture of a younger, more vulnerable version of her, a version I hadn't expected to imagine. "I've kept that night to myself for years," she said finally. "And now here I am, telling it to a stranger." I met her gaze again, feeling the invisible line between us blur even further. "You don't feel like a stranger," I found myself saying before I could stop. A small smile tugged at her lips, not playful, but knowing. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she let her hands continue their path, her touch now carrying a weight that matched the story she'd just shared. And as I lay there, I couldn't help but wonder what else she hadn't told me yet. Claire's confession lingered in my mind, echoing through the quiet room. Her hands continued their slow, deliberate rhythm, but now every touch felt charged with the weight of what she had revealed. I could almost feel the memories running beneath her skin, the ghost of someone she had once cared for and lost. "You remind me of them," she said finally, her voice almost trembling. "Not just in the way you look, but in the way you listen. They had this way of making me feel like I could say anything without being judged." Something about her words unsettled me, not in a bad way, but in a way that stirred a strange curiosity. Who is this person? And why did Claire see them in me? Were they someone close to you? I asked. Her eyes flickered with hesitation, and for a moment, I thought she wouldn't answer. But then she sighed, her shoulders softening. "Closer than anyone else ever was. We grew up together. I thought I knew everything about them. But the night I told you about, it made me realize there were parts of them I never saw. Parts that scared me and thrilled me at the same time." She stepped closer, her hands resting lightly against my chest as she leaned in, speaking so softly I could barely hear. "And when I look at you, I feel those parts again. It's like they've come back." Her words sent a strange chill through me. I wasn't sure if it was the intimacy of her tone or the fact that I could feel her heartbeat faintly against my arm. I tried to piece together what she was saying, but the details were just vague enough to keep me hooked. My mind started to paint its own picture, a young Claire caught in a moment that blurred the lines between friendship and something more. She moved her hands to my arms, tracing slow, deliberate lines down to my wrists. "You even have the same way of tensing when someone gets too close," she said softly, her lips curling into a faint, almost sad smile. "I can feel it in your muscles." I didn't know whether to pull back or lean into the connection she was weaving between us. There was a gravity in her presence that made it hard to think clearly. The background music seemed quieter now, replaced by the sound of our breathing and the faint rustle of the sheets beneath me. "You know," she continued, "sometimes I think the past finds its way back to us, just in different forms, different faces. Maybe you're here for a reason." Her eyes locked onto mine, and I felt something shift deep inside me. Whatever line we had been balancing on, it was becoming thinner by the second. And I couldn't help but wonder, was I about to become a part of her unfinished story? Claire's gaze didn't waver. Her hands had stilled now, resting lightly on my arms, as though she needed to anchor herself before saying what was on her mind. "There's something I haven't told you," she began, her voice slow and deliberate. "That person I cared for, the one you remind me of, it wasn't just a friend. It was someone I wasn't supposed to care about that way." My chest tightened. The air between us seemed to thicken. Not supposed to? I asked carefully. She nodded, her eyes darkening as if replaying the memory. They were part of my family. Not by blood, but close enough that everyone would have called it wrong. We were supposed to be like siblings. Her words hit me harder than I expected. The picture she had been painting all along suddenly sharpened. This wasn't just a bittersweet memory, it was a secret soaked in taboo, a moment that must have carried both deep longing and deep shame. I didn't plan for it to happen, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. One night, I was giving them a massage much like this. It started out innocent, just trying to help them with a sore back. But the way they looked at me, she trailed off, her gaze flickering to my lips for just a second before meeting my eyes again. I could see everything they were feeling, and I felt it too. And then, she hesitated, biting her lower lip. We crossed a line we could never uncross. The silence that followed was heavy. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. Her confession wasn't just about her past, it was about the dangerous possibility of history repeating itself. Why are you telling me this? I asked finally, my voice low. Her expression softened into something that was equal parts sad and resolute. Because when I'm with you, I feel that same pull. And I don't want to pretend I don't. Her hands moved again, slowly, tracing along my forearms, her touch feather-light. I know I shouldn't feel this way. But I can't help it. You're not them, and yet, you are. Every part of me is screaming to keep my distance, but here I am. I should have said something, anything to break the tension, but my voice refused to come. All I could do was look at her, my thoughts tangled between shock, curiosity, and a flicker of something I didn't want to name. Claire's eyes softened as she leaned just a little closer. Now you know my truth, she whispered. What you do with it is up to you. In that moment, I realized something unsettling. This wasn't just her confession anymore. It was an invitation. Her words hung in the air like a dare, soft, but impossible to ignore. I could feel the heat radiating from her, the faint rhythm of her breathing, the gravity of her gaze locking me in place. The line between us was paper-thin now, fragile enough that the slightest movement could shatter it completely. I knew what I should do. I should thank her for the massage, stand up, and leave. Walk out into the cool evening air and let this moment dissolve into nothing but an odd, fleeting encounter. That would be the right choice, the safe choice. But my body didn't move. Instead, I found myself studying her face, the curve of her cheek, the softness in her eyes that clashed with the danger in her confession. There was no denying the electricity in the room, the quiet understanding that something unspoken had already been exchanged between us. You're quiet, she said finally, her voice careful. I'm thinking, I replied. Her lips curled into a faint, bittersweet smile. About walking away? About what happens if I don't, I admitted. The room felt smaller somehow, the walls closing in, the air warmer. My mind replayed her story, the stolen night from her past, the way it haunted her, and I wondered if stepping closer now would make me just another ghost she'd carry with her. Claire took a slow breath, her fingers brushing lightly over my hand, a touch so subtle it could have been accidental, except it wasn't. If you stay, she said softly, there's no going back. Not for me. Not for you. Her honesty disarmed me. She wasn't hiding behind pretense or charm. She was telling me exactly what was at stake. I swallowed hard, my voice low. And if I leave? She looked down for a moment, then met my eyes again. Then I'll keep wondering, and so will you. It was a dangerous truth, and we both knew it. For a moment, neither of us moved. The faint chime-like music in the background seemed almost mocking in its serenity compared to the storm brewing in my chest. Every second felt like a choice, a chance to step away or to lean in. I thought about the way she had looked at me when I first walked in, the way her story unfolded like a secret meant only for me, the way my pulse quickened every time her touch lingered. And in that suspended moment, I realized there was no neutral ground. I couldn't just be a passive observer in this. Whatever happened next would define everything that came after. Claire's hand was still lightly over mine, her eyes searching mine for an answer I hadn't yet decided to give. I took a breath. I'm not walking away. Her lips parted slightly, her expression a mix of relief and something far deeper. And, just like that, The choice was made. The moment I said it, "I'm not walking away," something shifted in the air. Claire didn't rush toward me, didn't make any sudden move. Instead, she simply stood there, her gaze locked on mine, as if memorizing my face at the exact second the line between us vanished. The massage ended, though neither of us acknowledged it. The quiet hum of the music seemed louder now, the lavender-scented air almost suffocating. She moved around the table slowly, her presence still close, her touch brushing against me here and there, small, almost accidental gestures that carried more weight than anything else we had shared. When I finally sat up, she stood just a few feet away, watching me. Her expression was unreadable, though her eyes still held that same mix of vulnerability and intent. "I don't know what happens now," she admitted. "Neither do I replied. We didn't try to fill the silence after that. It was heavy but not uncomfortable, more like a space we were both afraid to disturb. She handed me a glass of water, her fingers grazing mine just enough to send a ripple of awareness through me. As I left the spa, the evening air felt cooler than I remembered. The streets outside were quiet, the bookstore and flower shop next door already closed. I walked slowly, almost reluctant to put distance between us, even though I knew I had to. That night, I lay awake replaying every moment, the way her voice had lowered when she spoke about her past, the way her eyes searched mine for an answer, the quiet certainty in her confession. I didn't know if I was drawn to her because of who she was, or because of the story she had shared, but I couldn't deny the pull. Over the following days, I kept expecting the memory to fade, for logic to overtake whatever strange connection had formed in that dimly lit room. But it didn't. If anything, it grew stronger, like a secret only the two of us carried. 1 week later, I found myself standing outside the spa again. I told myself it was just for another massage, that I wanted to relax after a stressful week. But when I saw her through the window, her eyes catching mine the moment I walked in, I knew I was lying to myself. She smiled faintly, almost as if she had been expecting me. "You came back," she said softly. "I told you I wouldn't walk away," I replied. In that instant, I understood that whatever line had been crossed that day wasn't something we could erase. It wasn't a moment to be neatly boxed away as a mistake or a passing impulse. It was the beginning of something uncertain, risky, and impossible to ignore. And deep down, I knew that the shocking confession she had given me was only the first of many. Short, it was midnight when I heard the knock. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then, his voice called my name. I opened the door, and there he was, my neighbor, standing in the dim light, his eyes unreadable. He said he needed to talk. We sat in my kitchen, silence hanging heavy. Then, without warning, he leaned in and whispered something that froze me. "I can't stop thinking about you." My heart pounded. I knew this was wrong. But the way he looked at me, it felt like the world outside didn't exist. The clock ticked, and, before I could stop myself, I leaned closer. That night, nothing was the same again. 101.